Similarly, we will plant new trees. We should follow footsteps of our Prime Minister. We will protect our mother planet. This planet is our identity, and we cannot afford and technology which is causing our lives. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum. Kathleen Dean says, and I quote, Climate change is the most pressing and urgent challenge faced by our age has done. And this urgent matter requires keen leadership and active participation to minimize the effects of climate change. And this worldwide phenomenon. Dear audience, the awareness raising is one of, and for the shift towards a livable, happy world, youth need to be more active and more vocal. Mr. President, of all the other natural resources through harmful actions of humans are the world's killers and stop them from killing our dear world. And I believe that only, but as someone has said, humans are the only creatures. And my dear fellows, as Quran says, Allah help those who help themselves. Let us come forward and discuss the issue among us. And together, inshallah, we will find a way to...
Without any trees. Imagine lush green meadows covered with sand turned into pools of muddy water. Imagine clear and fresh air around us. Make this world a better place to live in for you.
Today at this Climate Diplomacy Day is Mr. Rab Nawaz, representing WWF-Pakistan. Hailing from Winchester, United Kingdom, Mr. Rab Nawaz has worked with the World Pheasant Association Pakistan on the Western Tragopan pheasant, and from 1999 to 2007 in Palas Valley with the Himalayan Jungle Project and the Palas Conservation and Developmental Project. He also coordinates
with Hamad Naki Khan, our DG, who unfortunately couldn't make it. I welcome you on behalf of WWF. I'd like to take a special thanks to Her Excellency, ambassador-designate, and also Malik Amin Aslam, the advisor to the Prime Minister on climate change, for attending this today, and of course all the other colleagues, friends from embassies and consulates, and everybody who turned up today. Thank you for coming. This is our 4th year, and each year it gets better, and we love to see people getting out onto the streets and voicing the concerns for this big issue. Last week I was fortunate to be in New York City, not for the UNGA, but for the Equator Initiative. Now, the Equator Initiative looks at indigenous communities and what they're doing for climate change. And this year, 800 applicants were submitted and 22 were chosen. And it gives me great pride that Pakistan was one of those winners. Unfortunately, the guy who did the work came from Balochistan. He couldn't speak Urdu, let alone so he couldn't speak Urdu or English, living on the borders of Afghanistan, and he couldn't get his visa, unfortunately. But they asked me to attend, and I was absolutely inspired and astonished to see what communities are doing for climate change. And I think this also, though I agree with the documentary that the future is in business, but we also need to take a step back. The communities who've been living in these forests, living on the coasts, living in the deserts, living in different ecosystems, they've been managing these systems for centuries. And they know how to sustainably manage resources. So though technology has a very important part to play in the future of mitigating and adapting to climate change, we must support our local communities and helping them and recognizing their contribution to conservation. It was a bit of a scary video, the documentary, a lot of negative things there. But again, I would like to just give you a few examples that Pakistan is leading the way in mitigating and adapting to climate change. In Pakistan, we've brought species back from extinction. We've brought habitats back to extinction. We have made value chains efficient and eco-friendly. So just to give you examples, in the world there are 5 freshwater dolphins. And all of them, except the Indus blind dolphin, is going towards extinction. And about 15 years ago, the Indus blind dolphin, which is of course lives in the Indus River, was declining. It went down to about 800 animals. But with the help, with the collaboration of WWF, IUCN, the Wildlife Department, Irrigation Department, Fisheries Department, when we did the census about 2 years ago, the Indus dolphin has doubled in size and population. This just shows that coming together with good intention can do something. We didn't have billions of dollars. We didn't have huge donors behind us. We had good intention and good partners. If you look at mangroves again were on the verge of being cut down completely. They went down to about 80,000 hectares about 5 years ago. Again, with collaboration of us, IUCN, forest departments, different donors, the mangroves of Pakistan are now crossed 120,000 hectares. Again, a good success. The same goes for Chilgoza Forest, which, by the way, was the recipient of that Equitable Initiative Prize, and Juniper Forest. Now, we talked about businesses. In 2010, when we had a super flood in the country, Pakistan was the first country to get its cotton certified as Better Cotton Initiative. Better Cotton Initiative is a third-party verification which basically looks at the value chain of the cotton, and we managed to bring down the water usage, reduce the fertilizer, the input, but in the same time actually increasing production. So Pakistan is one of the biggest exporters of better cotton, and again, I don't have to push up, but that was the EU-funded project. Everybody criticizes the government. We love to criticize the government when it comes to environment, and I'm not a great fan of politics, but the stand and the direction which this government is taking the country in terms of environment is fantastic. I think even from when we saw this in KPK with the Billion Tree Initiative plantation, and this year with this term with the 10 billion, the government needs you to help them achieve this. They can't do anything alone. It has to be all of us coming together, changing our ways, changing our practices, and making Pakistan a better place to live. With the risk of losing my job, I don't really agree with David Attenborough that we will determine how nature survives. Nature will survive whether we like it or not. She's very resilient. She's been around for millions of years. It's up to us whether we want to be on that ride with her or not. And we used to say, when I joined WWF 20 years ago, that we have to leave a good planet for the next generation. That's wrong. We need to leave a good generation for the planet in the future. So thank you for coming. I look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.
An existential threat, and so nicely and with so much passion about it. The world is already witnessing multiple devastating impacts of climate change, yet climate change action to stem it remains insufficient. It's important to note that climate change does not affect all countries in the same way, and not even within a country, does not affect all people within a country in the same way. Of course, not all countries are equally responsible for climate change effects and increase in temperature. The human consequences of climate change include more food insecurity, reduction in crop yields, increased migration, and dramatic change to coastal communities, just to name a few. The UN has warned that there is now a climate change crisis every week. It has also warned that climate apartheid will divide the world between those that have the means to adapt to higher temperatures and those that do not. It has been proven that in already stressed societies, climate change multiplies the threat of conflict. I have witnessed from my previous job in many, many areas of the world, how climate change is causing more conflict, more deaths, more displacement, more refugees than a lot of the traditional types of conflict. Let me just give you examples. In Nigeria, northeast Nigeria, and it was mentioned Lake Chad region of northeast Nigeria, there is currently an ongoing conflict with Boko Haram. Many people are dying there. However, if you look at where are the most deaths in Nigeria, they're not there, but they're in the middle belt. And why? Because now, because of climate change, the people that were herders that had to move their animals in order to find water are clashing with farmers because they're both groups are fighting for the same resources. If we look at in areas more closely to here, last year, the number of people displaced in Afghanistan due to drought, I wouldn't say it was the same as people being displaced because of the conflict, but they were huge. We're talking millions. We had floods in Bangladesh and many of the countries in this region. Ladies and gentlemen, how can we address this challenge? Well, on climate, just like in all security issues, the world needs to work and address this issue in cooperation. The EU position is very clear. It promotes multilateral solutions because multilateral solutions are more just and more fair. Multilateral solutions take all voices into consideration and in the design of the solution. Multilateral solutions are also much more effective. Therefore, the EU continues to reaffirm its steadfast commitment to the Paris Agreement, as it is the cornerstone of the rules-based international order. We have heard also in the film that it's not just governments that have to be involved and not just citizens, but also the private sector. And its engagement in carrying out climate and sustainable development agenda forward is essential. Sustainable finance approaches, regulatory predictability, and enabling business environments are also key for the transformative shift. They provide economic actors with a clear direction of travel with respect to business planning and investment choices, as well as for opportunities. As far as opportunities are concerned, let me give you a very concrete example. The current investment plan for climate change adaptation in the EU is expected to create 50,000 jobs by next year, and by the year 2050, about 500,000 new jobs. Increasing the adaptation of expenses to 1% of GDP in the EU would generate 1 million jobs by 2050. The EU, the Member States, and the European Investment Bank are together the biggest contributor of public climate finance for developing countries, with over 20 billion euros being invested in 2017 alone. The EU partners also with G20 countries, providing technical support for emission trading systems. When it comes to EU and Pakistan, we have identified climate change and the environment as one of the new strategic areas in the recently signed strategic engagement plan. This plan was signed in June this year, and it identifies the areas where the EU and Pakistan would be working closely together in the future. Pakistan, like other countries, is battling with a variety of effects of climate change. I'm not here to tell you what are those. I'm sure you know that much better than I do. But I would like to underline that we, the European Union, we have been partnering with Pakistan in trying to address some of those issues. And I would like to just mention a few of the current programs that we are implementing in Pakistan of a total amount of financing of 180 million euros. which are climate change related. We have a program which is dealing with implementation of resource and energy efficient technologies in the sugar sector, which aims at sustainable production of sugar and bagasse. Another project is dealing with the promotion of sustainable dairy and horticulture for SME development, which SMEs were using
for 10 kilometers. And I think at least all of us who were part of that cycle ride got a wake-up call from climate change this morning. The idea was to raise awareness for climate change, to talk about climate change, and get the youth together. I was in this room 2-3 days back. It was packed with youth talking about climate change again. So I think, and I was really impressed by all the speakers who were on stage talking about climate change. It was really heartening to hear them talk so passionately about the issue and to have the right knowledge in them about this issue. So I think that gives us a lot of hope to see our youth taking this cause up, and hope that they feel that this is an issue that is for their future. Climate change is certainly reaching threshold levels, and this Climate Diplomacy Day that we are celebrating here today is really to talk about the one big problem in climate change. I've been a negotiator for climate change for the last 15 years, and we've seen in the last 15 years the climate science really leap forward conclusively. Last year, 2,500 scientists of the world through the IPCC platform gave us a clear warning signal for climate change. They gave us 12 years till 2030 before the threshold effect takes place. Now the threshold effect is when nature takes over. And I agree with Mr. Rab Nawaz, and I don't agree with Mr. David Attenborough, who said that we are going to decide what nature does, because nature is going to decide what nature does. And when we push it over the threshold, nobody knows what nature is going to do. And we're seeing it in trailers in different parts of the planet now, where we are pushing it over the threshold, and we are seeing consequences which have never been seen before in this world. So I think that 12-year period is with us. We've seen also the economics of climate change come forward very clearly. Lord Stern of the UK got out a report about 4 or 5 years back in which he clearly stated that a lot of economists got together for that report, and they clearly stated that the climate change is not an environmental issue. It is an issue of economics, it is an issue of development, and it is an issue of national security. And that report is now reverberating in all the economies, least of all Pakistan, where our economy is getting directly affected by climate change today. I will just, about 5 to 6% of our GDP gets washed away because of forced adaptation that we have to take for issues of climate change. The third issue, the scientists are clear, the economists are clear, the physical reality is even more clear than both the scientists and the economists, because you see climate change happening all over the world, and what the Excellency, the ambassador said that, every week climate change is striking some part of the world. And we see it in Pakistan very clearly. 2010, we had the worst floods, which are called the super floods, cost us $10 billion to adapt to. 2012, Karachi was hit by the heat strike, which killed 1,200 people in 1 week. 2018, which was last year, we had the hottest place on earth in Pakistan. It was Islamabad, and if you read the Time magazine for this month, that has a lead story on that. And this year, we've had 3 GLOF strikes, glacial lake outburst floods in the northern parts of Pakistan, mostly in Chitral, where the warming is occurring, and you can actually see the glaciers melting. Pakistan is one of the rare countries where you actually, I've been to those parts, and you can see the glaciers coming down in terms of the size. So I think we are facing that reality in Pakistan. But the one thing where the climate change arena is lacking behind is politics. Politics is totally out of sync with reality on climate change. And that's why we have this Climate Diplomacy Day every year. And that is the reason why the youth of the world have risen against the politics of climate change. because you go to these COP meetings year in, year out, and nothing seems to move. I've been to them, as I said, for 15 years. The two threshold points were the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, when you could actually see the world getting together on something. Kyoto Protocol brought out the market-based instruments. So that was one solution which was brought forward for climate change, that the markets are going to solve us the climate change solution. But ironically, what happened was that the one country which was really pushing forward for market-based instruments pulled out of the climate talks as soon as Kyoto Protocol got signed, and we all know which that country was. And then we had the Paris Agreement after a number of years, in which all the countries, including developed and developing countries, brought out actions that they could take, called the NDCs, or nationally determined contributions. So they all got together. They had, Pakistan also put forward our NDC and what we can do for the future. But then again, we had, political strike, a few countries which really mattered, slowed down, pulled out, and then we are back to square one. So I think that's the problem with climate change, where everything else is very clear. The politics is getting more and more ambiguous. It's actually falling behind the reality and the world which is moving forward. So with the youth of the world, I also fear for what is in stake for us, and I hope we can move that agenda forward. Pakistan as a country, well, we are, as I said, we are very affected by climate change. We are not one of the main contributors. We are less than 1% of global emissions, but we've been on the top 10 vulnerable countries for the last decade continuously. We were number 2 on that list in terms of the economic loss that countries have borne because of climate change. So yes, we are affected, and yes, we are part of the climate injustice, climate apartheid issue that has been talked about. We are the country which is affected by that. But yet we are a country which is taking strides to, not do our part, but do more than our part for climate change. And we are doing it because it affects us. It is something which is, we feel, something we can do for us and also for the world. Our political party, PTI, which I belong to, was in fact the first political party to put this agenda on the political agenda in Pakistan. We had a clear-cut green agenda before the 2013 election. And then we became the first political party to actually start implementing that agenda through the Billion Tree Tsunami Project, through having 350 micro-hydro projects set up in the province of KP. And that got globally recognized. And it has also pushed other political parties to start talking, debating on this agenda. And now, we have within our government right now, and this is all backed by our Prime Minister, who is extremely sensitized to this issue. He talks about it with passion, and he's been talking about it for a long time. So, we share this passion with him, and, he's totally backing this whole agenda forward. We worked over the last year to put forward a 5-point clear agenda for our government on the environment and climate change. It includes the 10 billion tree project that we have started. We've got plans in all the provinces. It wasn't an easy task because, KP was easy because it was one province, one budget, and one plan. But now we had 7 plans, different types of forestation, which includes rewilding, natural regeneration, getting our mangroves right, getting afforestation, plantation forests, restocking in Punjab. So all sorts of plans were there, urban forestry. So, but now we have those plans in place. We've got the funds in place, and we are moving forward on that project. The second thing is electric vehicles. We were totally out of e-mobility in Pakistan, but we've got a policy in place which is gone to cabinet for its approval. So hopefully, we are going to set the targets and move forward on electric vehicles, which is going to help us, get out of the fossil fuel economy. Number 3 is what is called Clean Green Index. So we've been working on this index. It's a local government function, but the federal government has developed this index to have a competition among 20 countries for solid waste management, liquid waste management, sanitation, and clean drinking water. So these aspects are going to be monitored by the federal government and be implemented by local governments, and they will be rewarded for good work and penalized for the cities who lag behind on that. The fourth one is the plastic ban. We have started the plastic ban in Islamabad. It's been, we've had 3 or 4 bans before this also, but this time it has been different. Government is committed to it and committed to the enforcement. We haven't yet penalized anybody on the plastic ban, although there is a penalty in the ban. But people have, got on and they have collaborated with us, shopkeepers, markets, malls, and you see a major reduction in the plastic bag usage in Islamabad. So we hope to take this all over Pakistan because it's a big menace for Pakistan. And the fifth and the last one is called Recharge Pakistan. That is an initiative which we are working with WWF and Asian Development Bank. And it actually, puts forward the question of resource use in Pakistan. We have water which comes in a surge. We have, the flood water comes in and then we flush it down all into the Arabian Sea. And then for the rest of the 9 months, we are without water. So we want to use that huge surge of water. And, we worked with the Ramsar Convention and they identified about 15 wetland sites on the right and the left bank of the Indus where you can divert that water during flood water times to recharge not only the groundwater, but restore the ecosystems in Pakistan. So this is the clear agenda that we have, and we are also at the center of it is to how to create the funds to do this. Pakistan government is totally committed to all of them, is providing the funding for it, but we're also creating vehicles for our partners to come on board if they want to take part of this initiative, and we're calling it the Ecosystem Restoration Fund. We hope to launch it at COP25 in Chile, and we already have a number of projects which are in it through our donors and various funding agencies. So I think that our government is very clear. We think climate change is the issue that we cannot push under the rug, and although our economy is faced with serious challenges, as we all know, but even in this stressed economy, climate change has got its pie of the cake in the economy, and that's what matters at the end. If you can get the government to allocate the budget, it shows a commitment from the government, and we have that commitment from the government. So I hope we can move forward on this. And as our Prime Minister said at the UNSC, this is not something that any country in the world can do alone. So we need to be collaborative, cooperative, and we need to do it for our youth of tomorrow because it is their future which is at stake. Thank you very much.